Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's dive into the top headlines this hour. Nearly 127 million voters head to the polls in Bangladesh, a key test of democracy after Sheikh Hasina was ousted in a 2024 uprising. The race pits the BNP against a Jamaat-e-Islamic-led coalition as voters also decide on a new national charter. Police say an 18-year-old woman killed her mother and stepbrother before opening fire at her former school in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia. 9 people, including the suspect who died by suicide, are dead in one of Canada's deadliest mass shootings. The motive is still unknown. President Trump says talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu produced no definitive agreement on Iran. Netanyahu says Israel's security must be protected and signals no clear US commitment to expand talks beyond Iran's nuclear program. Prime Minister Netanyahu also says Israel joins President Donald Trump's Board of Peace during talks in Washington. Images show Netanyahu signing the accession document after meeting Secretary of State Marco Rubio, confirming Israel's membership. An advisor to Iran's supreme leader says Tehran will not compromise on its missile capabilities amid ongoing talks with the US. Ali Shamkhani calls the missile program non-negotiable during events marking the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. Pro-Palestinian protesters rally in Melbourne on the final day of Israeli President Herzog's visit after clashes in Sydney and demonstrations in Canberra. Protesters unite across the country as Prime Minister Anthony Albanese hosts the visit following a deadly Sydney shooting. The US House votes 219 to 211 to reject Donald Trump's tariffs on Canadian goods, with 6 Republicans joining Democrats in a rare rebuke. The measure now moves to the Senate but faces a likely presidential veto if it reaches the White House. WhatsApp says Russia attempts to fully block the messaging app in a move that could affect up to 100 million users. The company claims the move is aimed at pushing people towards a state-controlled rival service. Ukrainian officials say Kyiv is under a massive Russian missile attack with explosions reported and buildings hit across the capital. Emergency teams are deployed and no casualties are confirmed. Those are the headlines for the hour. We start in Bangladesh, where voting is underway across the country in a high-stakes general election with polls open nationwide amid heavy security and heightened political tension. Bangladesh Nationalist Party leader Tariq Rahman has cast his vote, urging supporters to participate peacefully as the country decides its political future. Interim leader Muhammad Yunus has also called for calm and restraint, appealing to all parties and stakeholders to uphold democratic norms during the polling process. Opposition parties continue to raise concerns over fairness, while authorities insist the vote will be free and transparent. Results are expected after polls close later today. Joining us to discuss the ongoing election in Bangladesh is Major General G.G. Davidi, a war veteran and Professor of International Relations and Strategic Studies, joining us live from the Indian capital. Thank you very much for joining us, General Davidi, here on NewsX World.
Thank you, Thomas.
Pleasure. Transparency, stability, fairness, these are all words which Muhammad Yunus has pitted this election to be. Are we seeing that coming out of Bangladesh today?
Well, Thomas, first and foremost, these elections are really very high-stake elections, and they will define Bangladesh destiny in times to come. And as you said, I'm a war veteran. Yes, I fought Bangladesh war, so I follow these development very, very closely. Well, you raised a very fundamental question because primarily in democratic system, the election ought to be fair, they ought to be free, and they have to have certain amount of assurance to the voters that everyone will get a fair chance. But in this case, I think there are some question marks on the fairness and free elections. First and foremost, the main Awami League party, which was headed by Sheikh Hasina, who was ousted in August 24 after the massive protest by the student, is barred from the elections. So therefore, that is the first major question mark. Secondly, currently the main parties which are in fray is Bangladesh National Party, of course, led by Tariq Rahman. They are advocating that they'll ensure that democracy returns to Bangladesh and they'll go for anti-corruption campaign. But on the other side are the Jamaatis, which is a alliance of about 11 small parties, and they have a very Islamist and radicalized agenda which have been tacitly supported by Muhammad Yunus and his dispensation. So, and third point is the number of attacks that are taking place on the minorities, especially Hindus. They have been intimidated, and Hindus primarily have voted for Sheikh Hasina. So, how far they'll be coming out to vote is again a major question mark. So, we have to wait and watch as to how the elections are actually conducted. But these are the fundamental, I would say concerns whether the election will be fair or free.
Indeed.
Thomas.
And a 50% turnout is expected. We are also seeing from Hasina's constituencies, as you've mentioned, after the Awami League was banned, an extremely low turnout from said constituencies. Despite this, and of course the banning of the Awami League, do you expect this to bring political stability in the long run? We haven't heard of many reports of disorder yet. Do you think that this will indeed bring a stable Bangladesh after the polls close?
Well, Thomas, I just did a piece for the first post, and basically there are two directions where Bangladesh could go. If the Bangladesh National Party, led by Tariq Rahman, comes to power, and at least on the face of it, they are claiming that they will ensure the democratic government is back on the rails and they will ensure anti-corruption campaign. So that is the one direction that Bangladesh could go. But in case the Islamist alliance of Jamaatis, they come to power, then they have a very different agenda. And that will mean that Bangladesh will slid in to a Islamist kind of a state, and many people fear it will be back erstwhile East Pakistan. And incidentally, because I fought the war, the Jamaatis largely had supported the Pakistan during the 1971 war, and their military wing Razakars were actually fought. They fought actually along with the Pakistan army. So these are the two directions that possibly Bangladesh could go. Either it could come back onto the democratic elected government, or it could slip into a radicalized state. Now that is, we have to wait and watch. But one way or the other, Jamaatis will be calling the shots because they are in a very, very close race with the BNP. So therefore, whether they get into power or they are out of power, but they'll be definitely a force to reckon with, Thomas.
Very briefly, we don't have much time left. The vote pits now the BNP, the Bangladesh National Party, against the Islamist party, the Jamaat-e-Islami. What would a win for either mean for the region?
Well, for the region, definitely the Bangladesh elections are not only confined to Bangladesh, it has larger impact on the region, especially when you take the region India, because for India, Bangladesh is a very important neighbor. It has a strategic importance because it sits between the India's mainland and the northeast, and also Bangladesh has direct access to the Bay of Bengal. But the way Yunus government has actually carried out the foreign policy, it has been I think, deeply or highly tilted towards China and, of course, Pakistan, because it has reset its relations with Pakistan, and the kind of military exchanges between the two armies that are taking place is a cause of serious concern. So therefore, I think, Thomas, the point is it is very, very crucial for the region, especially for India, which way the election go, because India would definitely like a stable Bangladesh, a Bangladesh which follows a neutral policy, if not policy which favors India. And it will be the last thing which India would want, that the Jamaatis or Islamists come into power. That will ensure that region will be unstable, especially with Myanmar, which is again in a very, very dynamic and a fluid state. Thomas.
Major General Javidi, do stay with us as we turn over from South to East Asia for our next story. The Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te has warned that China's expansion could threaten other countries in the region if Beijing attacks the democratic island. In an interview, Lai said Taiwan must dramatically strengthen its defences. He expects Parliament to approve an additional $40 billion loan for critical weapons, including purchases from the United States. Lai said the US will stand by Taiwan and will not use the island as a bargaining chip with Beijing. He also cautioned that if China seizes Taiwan, the next targets could include Japan, the Philippines, and eventually reach the Americas and Europe. Lai noted recent purges of Chinese military generals are unusual, but do not reduce Taiwan's need to remain prepared. Let's take a listen into the statements.
中国有200万解放军，有40个上将，就现在在职的只有2位，这个情况的确不寻常。也就是说，台湾一旦被并吞，下一个受到威胁的国家就是日本、菲律宾，印太的国家，在下一步就会影响到美洲跟欧。
Major General Davidi joins us once again. Thank you very much for joining us. The Taiwanese president there making strong statements that China's influence, if it does achieve reunification, as its stated goal is to do, then China will also be a threat to Japan and even stretch as far as Europe. Given China's aggression towards the island of Taiwan, are the Taiwanese president's comments warranted?
Thomas, I think the comments of Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te actually merit due consideration. I think they are well founded, because as far as China is concerned, and its leadership, especially President Xi Jinping, has been very aggressive, and he has placed unification of Taiwan very high on the political agenda of China, and it has been stated in categorical terms in the white paper that in case unification doesn't, is not realized through peaceful means, then use of force remains an option. And having served as defense secretary in China and Korea, well, I can give you a little personal perception, because first and foremost, China treats the whole South China Sea as its own territorial waters, and they are drawn a 9-dash line, which actually overlaps the claims of at least 5 Southeast Asian states, including Philippines, Indonesia, Brunei, and of course Japan. The second point is that President Xi Jinping has been very aggressive. He has been repeating his claim on areas like Senkaku Islands, and that's why Prime Minister Takaichi had to make a statement that in case Taiwan is attacked, then willy-nilly Japan would also get involved. Now, seeing all this, President Lai Ching-te has increased the defense budget, or at least proposed the increase of defense budget to the tune of $40 billion, and that is required because in case Taiwan has to defend itself, it has to have a very strong defense, especially the air defense, missile capability, the fighter aircraft, which the Americans have been providing from time to time, because there is a act known as the Taiwan Relation Act. While America and Taiwan do not have diplomatic relations, but under this act, they have a certain mechanism to provide arms to Taiwan and also carry on with the trade and other relations. So the point is, I think Taiwan's president's statement must be taken very seriously. In case China does, seize Taiwan, then the next target would be Senkaku Island, the disputed waters of South and East China Sea, and already Spratly Island is under stress, and more than that, I think this to spill over into larger Western Pacific and Southeast Asia region.
Yes,
Thomas.
And Lai here saying that Taiwan won't be used by the United States as what he calls a bargaining chip in negotiations with Beijing. However, is that statement realistic, given the current shifting nature of geopolitics and, of course, the unpredictability of Donald Trump?
Well, you have made a very important point, unpredictability of President Trump, because President Trump has always given contradictory signals. At one side, in the national security strategy or also national defense strategy of America, it has been very clearly stated that China has to be contained and checked its influence, especially in the Western Pacific. At the same time, there have been also his, confinement to the Western Hemisphere, not to extend American outreach, not to defend countries of European nations and others, not to be a global policeman. All that also goes into contradiction. So therefore, I think this ambiguity, as far as America and Taiwan are concerned, it can be played either way. But the point is that in case President Trump resort to some trade-off with China at the cost of Taiwan, that will be very, very disastrous, not only for Taiwan but for the region as large. So I only hope that America maintains the status quo and retains the ambiguity of defending Taiwan in case of open aggression by China, but at the same time, as you rightly said, that it is very unpredictable which way President Trump will go. But I think in the larger interest of America and the region, I think America must retain that ambiguity and have a very clear message that in case Taiwan is attacked by China, then of course America would come in. And please remember, America has 60,000 troops based in Japan and 28,000 troops based in the Korean Peninsula, that is South Korea. So these troops are not going to sit idle, I'm sure, in case there is a blow-off between America and China on Taiwan. Thomas.
Major General Gigi Davidi, thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World and taking the time. We turn now to the United States, and the US Department of Justice has moved to fire Donald Kinsella, who was recently appointed as the new US Attorney for the Northern District of New York. This decision came after John Sarcone, who had been serving as the acting US Attorney, was disqualified by a federal court. The move has sparked criticism as the Trump administration has faced accusations of targeting political opponents. Sarcone's appointment was ruled unlawful by a federal judge, but the US Department of Justice attempted to retain him through legal procedures. These efforts were ultimately overturned in court, further adding to the legal challenges the administration has faced. Now we turn from the United States to Eastern Europe, and the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, came under a massive missile attack from Russia, officials have reported. The Kyiv mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, said both residential and non-residential buildings in the city on both sides of the Dnipro River were hit. Fragments fell near 2 residential buildings, but no fires broke out and no casualties were reported. Emergency teams were dispatched. Timur Tanakshenko, head of Kyiv's military administration, confirmed at least 1 hit in an eastern suburb. Air raid alerts remain in effect across Kyiv and Dnipro well past midnight. Mexico and the United States say they have carried out a coordinated operation in the Pacific Ocean, seizing a large consignment of cocaine and dealing a blow to transnational drug trafficking networks. Authorities say the operation involved a joint surveillance and interdiction efforts, leading to the recovery of multiple packages of illegal drugs from a vessel at sea. Officials have not disclosed the exact quantity seized, but say the operation underscores growing security cooperation between Mexico and the US. Investigations are continuing to identify those responsible and trace the destination of the drugs. Joining us on this story is Dr. Satoru Nagao. He is a fellow at the Hudson Institute. He joins us live from Tokyo in Japan. Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, the Trump administration's relationship with Mexico is rocky. However, this story shows how important security coordination is, particularly in the Pacific. What more does it say about that relationship?
Mexico is very cooperative in case of drugs, even if the President Trump's pressure-based diplomacy. So indeed, so on surface, President Sheinbaum clearly says Mexico has independent country, and so America should not intervene internally. But at the same time, this is of course she expressed on surface, but reality is very cooperative in case of drug. Because there are some reasons. Firstly, in case of the drug cartel, this is a common enemy for both the US and Mexico. And view from the root of the cocaine or other drugs that came from Venezuela or Colombia. Indeed, they use the sea route to come to Mexico, but some of the sea route still exist in going north to the United States, but mainly most of the drug landed in Mexico and going north to the United States through the land route. So then through this drug carrying, this drug is affecting many areas in Mexico. So that's why, indeed, Mexico itself is a victim of the drug war. So that's why the drug cartel is the main enemy, and anyway that they must cracking down. If U.S. really share the budget and military force to crack down, this is the chance for Mexico to crack down on drugs. So that's why even if on surface U.S. and Mexico there's some conflict, but reality is they cooperate very deeply, and that's why the President Trump and Sheinbaum both sides can satisfy in this case. So in the Pacific, this is a new area the drug cartel are using, but anyway, this will be the one of the main areas the two countries are cooperating against the drug cartel.
Dr. Satoru Nagao, thank you so much for taking the time in joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a great pleasure to talk to you. We move on now and back over to North America, and British Columbia Premier David Eby says that the full extent of the mass shooting in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, has not sunk in yet. The remote mining town is reeling after an 18-year-old suspect carried out a deadly attack at a local school, killing her mother and stepbrother before turning the gun on students and staff. Eby stressed the importance of understanding the cause of the violence, particularly when children are involved, and ensuring that steps are taken to prevent such tragedies in the future. The attack has left 8 dead, including 6 victims at the Tumbler Ridge Secondary School. Police are still investigating the motive behind the shooting. Let's take a listen into what British Columbia Premier David Eby had to say.
And any time that there's violence, and especially involving children, we all want to do all we can to understand what happened and to make sure that we're taking any steps to prevent tragedies like this from happening again. Police are doing their investigation, and it's also a community that's clearly in shock. The full extent of what has happened is not sunk in, and there are going to be some long days, weeks, and months ahead.
We move on now, and the United States says India is reducing its purchases of Russian oil and diversifying energy imports as lawmakers pressed the State Department on enforcement challenges linked to Moscow's war in Ukraine. At a House subcommittee hearing, Republican Representative Keith Self warned that continued Russian oil sales help finance the war and questioned how Washington would track indirect trade, including third-party traders and ship-to-ship transfers. Assistant Secretary of State Paul Kapur acknowledged enforcement complexities, but highlighted that India has been buying more US energy and diversifying supply sources. Let's take a listen into the statements.
Fortunately, I won't be in the enforcement business. That will be, I think, probably my DOW colleagues will be thinking about, ships that are traveling around. But I think.
But then maybe the question for you is, how are you going to measure it?
Yeah, I don't know the details of how that's going to be worked out. I'm happy to stay in touch with you about it. But the Indians have been reducing their purchases of Russian oil and diversifying away, which is what we wanted them to do. And they've actually been buying more U.S. energy, and that's, I think, a promising possibility is to substitute some U.S. energy for the...
We stay in the United States. The top Democrat on the U.S. House of Representatives Select Committee on China has signaled his openness to allowing the sale of older NVIDIA Hopper chips to Beijing, marking a shift from his predecessor's stance. Ro Khanna, a California Democrat, took over as ranking member of the committee earlier this year. His predecessor, Illinois Democrat Raja Krishnamurthy, co-sponsored a bill to block NVIDIA chip sales to China. Meanwhile, the Republican chair of the committee, John Mulnar, criticized President Donald Trump's decision to approve sales of NVIDIA's H200 AI chip, warning that China AI companies could exploit these chips for military purposes. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.